and I am your service leader today. Welcome to the University Unitarian Universalist congregation. So Patrick, unfortunately, when you started putting the slides up, I can't see my notes anymore. I didn't realize that. So hang on a second. Okay, there we go. Now much better. Before we get started, we're all kind of new to this format. So just a couple of ground rules. Generally, everybody will be on mute to avoid a lot of background noise. During the joys and concerns portion, if you have something to say, we will do a combination of people raising their hands, and then Judith will unmute you, or you can, if you have a joy or concern that you don't maybe want to say out loud, but you want for me to share, you can put it in the chat box. So that's how we'll handle that. And if you are having trouble with your internet connection or hearing or whatever, it is helpful sometimes to close any other programs that you might have running. If you have Word or a web browser beside the one that's running Zoom going, that can be really useful to turn off. So I wanted to welcome everybody here today. It's nice to see everybody's shining faces, those that I can see. Hey, before we get into the meat of it, thanks for putting that slide up about grabbing your chalice. Everyone's going to kind of have their own individual chalice. So if you have yours sitting on the other side of the room or haven't had a chance to bring it in, why don't you go ahead and do that? And while you're doing that, we're going to have committee moments. This is an opportunity before we get into the meat of the program for people to share anything about committees. So one announcement that I have so far is from Sarah Sullivan, who's running the covenant groups. If you haven't had a chance to join a covenant group yet, obviously these are being done over Zoom rather than in person. You can still do that. People are saying this has been really, really nice to connect with a small group and kind of just talk through all the ups and downs of being in quarantine. So you can send an email directly to Sarah, or you can send it to info@universityuus.org, and there's still an opportunity to join. From the women's group, I'll just represent them today. We've been kind of remiss in organizing a special Zoom for the women's group, but Roberta and I have been talking about doing one on Friday. So we just have to come up with a time that works, whether we do it more like before dinner, happy hour kind of check-in, or during our normal meeting time that we would do in the evening. So stay tuned if you're in the women's group. And if you don't get the women's group's emails, you can email me directly, annpackham@yahoo.com, and we'll add you to the list. In terms of other announcements, are there any other committee chairs that would like to make an announcement?
I have, Anse Kelly, I have several from the chat box. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So Sachs is going to extend the Share the Plague for the Zebra Coalition through May. Okay. So don't forget your donations today. Crystal says that the parent support group is meeting again tonight at 9 p.m. All are welcome, even if they don't usually join in person. She encourages everyone to please attend. And Patrick says, stop. Okay.
And I have one.
Okay. And then Dave has something.
Yeah. I haven't talked to Paul Mata yet, but the men's group will meet by Zoom. I'm hoping on the 13th or whatever the following Monday after Easter is. Maybe that's the 15th. I don't have it in front of me. But anyway, we're going to try to meet by Zoom. So I will talk to Paul and we'll set it up. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just to be clear, Crystal, will the link to the parent support group, the Zoom link, be on the website, or how will people know that?
Crystal, unmute yourself, Crystal.
You gotta unmute yourself, hon.
I'm a dork. Okay, so the link has already gone out in the notable news and the monthly newsletter, and it is also available on our Facebook group. If anybody would like the meeting code, you can get in contact with me, or we can throw it up in the chat a little bit later.
Great.
Hi. Also, millennial group, hopefully I'm going to try to start maybe a Zoom millennial group sometime this month, because we were planning on doing bowling in March, and then I moved it to April, and April's not going to happen either, obviously. So with the whole stay-at-home order through April 30th. So I'm hoping to possibly do maybe some kind of Zoom millennial group. Millennial group, stay tuned for stuff in our Facebook group. And if you're not part of our Facebook group, I'll try to get it out in the notable news for next week.
Thanks, Chloe. Any other raised hands or notes?
I think Amy has an announcement, and I have some more information from the chat, but go ahead, Amy.
Am I unmuted? Hey, everybody. I just wanted to let anybody know that hadn't caught on that youth group meets via Zoom on Sundays from 4 to 5 p.m. Chris Reed and I are moderating, and Chris has the link if anybody needs it still. So just get a hold of Chris Reed, text her or call her, and she'll be able to email you the link for the Zoom meet. Thanks.
Thanks.
Yes, so from the chat, we have Paul Mata just confirmed the men's group, that the date is the 13th, David. And Crystal just mentioned that she put the link, or Paul just put the parent support group on the website, the link.
That's teamwork. Wow. That's awesome. Okay, so let's move out of committee moments into our service. So instead of having my personal opening words, we felt it would be good to hear the words of Reverend Susan Patrick Gray. She's the president of the UUA, and she has a very nice message to all UUAs about getting through this difficult period in our history. So what we're going to have is just listen to that and take a moment to think about her words as we start. For those who are not familiar with the Unitarian Universalist Association, it's our governing body that kind of provides our guidance. She's a phenomenal speaker. She spoke at SUSE 2 years ago, and I think she has some really nice words to say. So whoever's running that video, take it away. Can't hear her.
Patrick, we're not hearing it.
Patrick, when you share it, you got to check that box that allows the share to show the audio of the video.
We navigate.
That works.
I'm Susan Frederick, president of Unitarian Universalist Association, and I'm coming to you from my home, where I and all of us at the UUA are moving to virtual operations and working from home. As we navigate these incredibly difficult and uncertain times for our country and our global community, I want you to know that I am holding you and all of our congregations, our members, our leaders, our people in my heart. I pray that you are making time to tend to your own heart and your own spirit. Take gentle care of yourselves. It is really easy to feel overwhelmed or inadequate or caught in fear these days. With all of the anxiety, grief, and fear that is real in this time, I believe that pastoral care and connecting across physical distance will be ever more important. As you tend to your own community and to each other, remember to take time to slow down, to breathe, to lean into your mission as a community and to the needs of your community. There really is no script for these times, and no one practice will work for all congregations. Leaning into mission, taking a time to slow down and think about what's most important can help guide you in this time. And remember that we're all learning here, trying new things and adapting as the news changes and conditions change. Perfection is never the goal. The goal is to care for one another and to live compassionately and mindful that we are in this together and that we are one human community and one you community. Know that your care and intention for one another really make a difference in this time, both to the people you know and love as well as for your own well-being. I'm enormously grateful for all of you and your commitment to one another and to our wider faith. It's times like these when we feel how deeply important our living tradition is and how much we need one another. I love you all so much. I'm proud of the way that Unitarian Universalists are taking this situation seriously and responding out of deep care. I'm proud of the ways that we are putting compassion and community care at the forefront of all we do. I am with you all in this time. I too am finding my way bit by bit. As the weeks go on, our needs may change. But let us remember how important it is to be bound together in religious community, connected to one another and offering both our care and our stories and sources of resilience and hope for this time. I love you all. Be well. Take good and gentle care of yourselves. Many blessings to each and every one of you.
Wow. That was a really a lovely message. I appreciate that. And I feel like we are doing that as a community with the covenant groups and the way the board has reached out to members. We're all taking care of each other. That's what's great about our community. So it's time to light our chalice. I have my little candle here. Unfortunately, it doesn't really show up very well on my screen, but we're going to do the best we can. So what we're all going to do is light our chalices individually, and then say the words on the screen. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. Everybody have a chance to light their chalice. And the next thing, has everybody got that? The next thing is our affirmation, and I hope that everybody's just saying these words together. I think if we unmute everybody, it's a cacophony. So let's just say them at home. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its gift. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek truth in love, and to help one another. I wanted to take this opportunity to welcome any guests that we may have in the virtual world. This is an opportunity for us. If we were meeting face to face, we would be shaking hands and hugging each other and greeting each other and welcoming each other to coffee after the service. So everyone's just going to have to get their own coffee cup on their own. But it's a chance for me to sort of let you a little bit know about our congregation. We are located in East Orlando, and we are a lay-led congregation. So we do not have a called minister. Every service is different. We have speakers from the intellectual communities, from various religious traditions, from various political action organizations, nonprofits, things like that. So we invite you to join us each week, where it'll be different, to get to know us a little bit better, and then hopefully join us in person when we're allowed to meet again, which we hope will be very soon. So take this moment to do a virtual wave and hug to all the neighbors here on the Zoom screen. I'm going to put my chalice down for a minute, but you don't have to do that. But just to make sure I navigate the screen well, I don't want to have it in my hand here. All right, so next we have our joys and concerns. This is a tradition within the UU world where we share the things that are most joyous in our lives. For some people, it may be just getting in their car and driving a couple of blocks these days, or any concerns that you may have, particular to that are significant. So what we're going to do is have people raise their hands, and then you'll be unmuted to share a joy or a concern. And we can start with that. And if we don't see you raise your hand, then we can, if you want to put some. Okay, Judith, are we going to have a time for all ages? I couldn't remember what was on the schedule.
Yes, we are.
Excellent.
All right.
I forgot to mention in the announcements, by the way, I mean, I think people know this, but that we have meditation at 8:30 in the mornings with probably a more serious Judith, and then story time at 4 o'clock. So don't forget to tune into those.
Thank you very much for that, Anne. We'll send out another email about that. So can everybody see me? And I'm going to ask that Martha and Anne and maybe Kelly just pay attention in case some of the answers to my questions come through in the chat.
All right.
So y'all can see me, right?
Basically, yes.
You can see, what am I wearing on my face?
A lot of glasses.
A ski mask.
Oh.
3 pair of glasses.
It's a little unusual, right? I'm wearing glasses. What are glasses for?
To see better.
Yeah, they are there to see better. I'm taking all the crazy glasses off now. Don't worry. They help you see better. Some of them help you see farther away. Some of them help you see closer. Some of them help you see the world a little differently. And I want to talk to you about how they make you see the world a little differently. Can y'all see this critter here?
Yeah.
We have a little lamb. Most of us know what a lamb is and what it looks like.
Can't see it.
You can't see the lamb?
You have to hold it up by your face.
It's not, no, it means I'm sharing the screen. It means you're not seeing the screen. Let me,
I see it.
There, you see it now?
I see I can only see your head.
Really? All right.
I can see the screen. I can see it.
There we go.
I can
How's
see
that? All right. So now you should see a little lamb on the screen. And it's a pretty normal sort of thing. And I want to talk to you about how glasses sometimes help you see things differently. They might help you see things further away. They might help you see things closer up, or they might change your view altogether. Sorry. Somebody's sending texts. They might change your view of the world altogether. And depending on how we see the world, how experiences we've had means we are used to seeing it a different way. If we're not someone who sees visually, who experiences the world visually, we sometimes have to experience it differently, such as touching, smelling, listening, sorry, there we go, took care of. Such as touching, seeing, smelling. This is unusual today. There are lots of things happening while I'm doing this. But if, depending on the glasses we're seeing, we become accustomed to the way we see the world. Do we normally see blue sheep though? It's not something we normally see. It's not something we generally experience in the world. This is kind of like our culture, how we experience the world and how we feel and the things that become normal to us. Some people might see the world through a different lens, a red lens that sees the world as red, and some as blue. The way we see the world is informed by our lives, by our music, by TV shows, by what people tell us. And that is kind of like our lens to the world. So what happens if we don't see the world the way someone else does? If we have glasses on that see it as blue, but someone keeps telling us they see it as red, we can't necessarily put their glasses on, but maybe we can put a lens in front of them and change from blue, add red, and we get this pretty purple. So glasses and lenses are a way to help us view the world a little differently. Our third principle says that we are a people who encourage acceptance of one another, which means that we encourage us to look through we encourage us to accept people looking through different lenses. And we encourage us all to encourage each other in our spiritual growth, which means we try to look through their lenses as well. But we can't just look through someone else's glasses. Sometimes we have to add something on to make that possible. All right, that's my story this morning. I think it feeds into what Pastor Jim Coffin is going to tell us later. So I will stop sharing the screen. There we go. And let the next person.
Hey, Judith, thank you very much. I appreciate that. So normally in our service right now, we would do our interlude and offering, but we decided to move that to the end of the service to give people time at the end to get out their checkbooks or whatnot. So instead, we're just going to jump right ahead to our speaker, and we're running a little bit after 11. So please stay with us. We may run over a little bit over 11:30, but I suspect that people don't have a lot of social engagements today that are happening at 11:30. So like you kind of have unlimited amount of time these days. So hopefully you'll stay with us. The Pastor Jim Coffin has been a visitor at our church many times. He is the executive director of the Interfaith Council of Central Florida. He was a Seventh-day Adventist minister and editor for 36 years. And Jim, let us confirm, but you said you have an editorial in this morning's online Orlando Sentinel. I haven't looked at my Sentinel yet. I decided to go out for a run this morning before the rain. So you can let us know if that's going to be there and give us an update. But thank you very much for being here today, and we appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much. And I do have an article that is online today, and
Great.
it's addressing the idea of this carve out for churches so that they can have much bigger crowds come together. And I'll just what's the word I want to say? Anyway, a sneak preview or a spoiler alert. I oppose the carve outs. I think it's a very bad idea. Anyway, that should appear in print on Monday or Tuesday, but it's online today. And so I would invite you to read it. And so on this little ad, and early to bed and early to rise is useless if you don't advertise. So.
Thank you. So you want to go ahead and with your words of wisdom?
Okay, I don't know that I can call them words of wisdom, but they're definitely words. So I can go ahead with that. It's always nice to be with you at UUUF. And one of the challenges that I have is that I come from a fairly narrow background as far as where the boundaries of acceptability and so are. And you have a much broader view than I grew up with. And so I find it to be extremely stimulating and extremely rewarding to be involved with you. And I was just going to make a little comment about the fact that you've changed the name from Society to Fellowship. And so it's now the University Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. And that creates a greater sense of obligation, actually, I think, because fellowships are very personal. They're very intimate. They're a real community. And so I think that you've created a bigger challenge for yourself, but a wonderful challenge. And so what I'm going to talk about today is a belief that is widespread and probably to some degree exists within your congregation, but it may be much more widespread in other areas. And that is the role of God in suffering and in the bad things that happen and the good things that happen in our life. And so I'm going to begin by telling a story, which was a defining moment for me, I guess is how I would describe it. A story where the suffering of someone was so prolonged and so intense and so varied that I said, I don't believe God could have a role in this. I don't think this is handed out by God. I think that explanation just doesn't work. And this happened during my very first year as a minister, and I was working in Australia at the time. And I had a friend who was a Christian bookseller stop by and told me that he'd stumbled onto somebody who had some real difficult problems they were facing and wondered if I would go see this woman. And it was about 25 miles from where I was pastoring. And I drove up to in the hills to where she lived, and she was very, very poor and had a very difficult life. Her husband had, by an earlier marriage, had 2 children who were born blind, but she had the responsibility of raising these blind children. They had very little money. Her husband was out of work. And as I talked to her, she poured out this great tale of woe, which was very heartrending. And she also was wrestling with the idea that her 19-year-old daughter was, her 19-year-old niece was in the hospital dying of leukemia. And so she says, why? Why is this happening? Why is God doing this to me? And so I gave the best explanation that I could and said I would come back and see her again. The next time I came back to see her, which was probably close to a month because it was some distance, she wasn't one of my parishioners and it was something that I fitted in, came back and she met me at the door and immediately began to cry. And she said, oh, since you were here last time, everything's gone wrong. She said, my brother, the father of the 19-year-old girl who's dying of leukemia, was a mechanic and he was on a creeper under the car and his fellow workmate said to him, hey, whatever his name was, and he didn't respond. And he went over and he died of a massive heart attack, 42 years of age, at a time where this daughter who was in the hospital dying of leukemia particularly needed her father. So the extended family was going through a very difficult time. And again, so she pours out, why is this happening? Why is God doing this? And I explained things as best I could. And I said I would come back to see her, but I wasn't too excited about coming back to see her because it kind of had negative vibes. So I waited a few weeks before I got back. And when I came back, she was very distraught because the 19-year-old had died. And that had been a terrible blow to the family on top of losing the 19-year-old's father, this woman's brother. And also her husband was still out of work, and they were facing very dire circumstances financially. And so I said I would come back and try to visit with her more. Well, I came back again, and she met me at the door, and this time she looked like she'd aged about 10 or 12 years just in the 3 or 4 weeks that I'd been away. And she said, "Oh, something absolutely terrible has happened." She said, "My husband, who was out of work, and my 16-year-old son, who was out of work, got a job driving a truck and hauling logs in from the timber into the mill. And the third day on the job, they'd loaded on a load of logs. My husband walked around the truck and threw the chain over the logs, and the load shifted before they got the chain on. The logs fell on him and crushed him. And so the son had to very gently and carefully use the loader to take one log at a time off of him so they didn't roll and do even more damage. And so he finally was able to get him free. He put him into the cab of the truck, and this had taken about half an hour. And they'd started the truck beforehand, and he just started to drive out, and the truck ran out of gas. It had been idling there for about half an hour, and they thought they would be able to get back okay and get gas, with this load of logs. And so the truck ran out of gas. So I had to leave his father there under a tree, and he ran 4 miles out to the main highway, and he flagged down a car, and he told them what had happened, and he came back. And of course, all of this took a great amount of time, and he was running and covering the 4 miles both directions. And he got back just in time to hold his father in his arms while his father died. And about that time, the ambulance arrived, and there was nothing that could do. And so the woman is absolutely just distraught beyond measure. And so I tried to comfort her as much as I could, and it was, why is God doing this to me? And what have I done wrong? I've tried to be a decent human being. This isn't something I deserve. Why is this happening? And so I comforted her as best I could and said that I would come back. But this place was kind of a place I didn't like to go, because everything just kept going wrong. Talk about Job with all of his troubles. And so I came back probably 3 or 4 weeks later and knocked on the door. And it was in the evening, probably about 6:30 or so in the evening. Sun was just starting to get low in the sky. She met me at the door, and she was crying, sobbing actually, and she just motioned for me to follow her. And so I followed her, and she took me they lived in a little hovel, a little shack really. And she took me in front of the little fireplace that was there, and on a blanket was a little puppy. And the puppy was obviously in dire difficulty and about to die. And she said, when my husband was killed, my 2 little girls were so totally distraught by it that I took money that the people gave to the family, and I bought a puppy for the girls. And she said, I thought this will give them something to focus on. It will turn their attention. And so she said, I bought this puppy. And she said, tonight we accidentally left the door open on the house. The puppy ran across the street into the field where the neighbor's horse was and started chasing the horse. And the horse kicked it in the head. And the puppy died while I was there. And, you can say, well, a puppy, it's only a puppy. But when a puppy is all you've got, a puppy is everything. And so she said, well, why? Why? And I've heard a lot of explanations about, God knows what's best, and God's in control. He's got the whole world in his hands. And nothing happens without a reason. And there are a lot of glib cliches that we throw around. And I think it was very fortunate, actually, that very early in my ministry, I went through such an experience, because I said, if there is a God of love, and I'm not trying to present this in order to convince anybody of that. I'm just saying that it doesn't really hang together when you say there's a God of love who's in total control, and these kind of things happen which so decimate human life. And it's easy if we look at suffering in the abstract and say, well, you know, maybe there's some cosmic good that comes from it or whatever. But when you get down to the nitty gritty of life, as it really happens, and you see people who face one thing after another, the further down the track you go of the pain and anguish that they go through, the harder it is to suggest that there's some type of divine force that's controlling everything and that's making sure that everything works out perfectly. Well, that was as I said, a defining moment or defining series of moments, a defining experience in my early ministry, and certainly made me very hesitant to use those kind of expressions like nothing happens without a reason. I believe that everything has a reason, certainly, but not a cosmic divine reason, not some master plan in the universe that this has to happen in this way and you learn this perfect lesson from that. I'm not saying that it's not possible for us to learn from the bad things we go through. And there's an expression that I probably buy into a bit: if it doesn't kill you, it can make you stronger. But the problem is that that it does kill some people. It kills them literally sometimes, but other times it just kills the spirit. It's so devastating that it kills the spirit, and it adds insult to injury. I believe that when we add these explanations about, well, God knew what he was doing, you know, it's going to work out for the best, and we make these rash promises. Now, in an organization like yours, in a fellowship like yours, with the diversity of thought that you have, those kind of arguments are not going to be put forward as often or as intensely as they are in much of the rest of society. But we live in a society with a Christian majority, and also a society where a significant number of the Christians are quite conservative and quite literalistic, and who look at things in such a way that they are comfortable passing out those kind of comments, and we have to know how we can live in fellowship with a society where those kind of ideas are being bandied about, despite the fact that they hurt people more than they actually bring comfort and solace to the people. And yet we have to be able to talk to them and communicate with them in such a way that we still are a community, that we're still a fellowship, whether it's a small fellowship such as you have within the UUUF, or whether we're talking more about the general community. I'd just like to kind of go back and look at some of this a little bit theologically and a little bit philosophically. When the Israelites were in Egypt, there were 2,200 gods. And if it snowed, there was a God who made it snow. If it rained, as it's going to do today, there's a God who makes it rain. Whatever happens, there's a God who makes it happen. But with the advent of Hebrew theology, there's the idea there's only one God. And so if it snows, that one God makes it snow. If it rains, that one God makes it rain. And so there's the idea that God is very involved, and they didn't have almost any understanding of secondary causes, of something that happened because that's the structure of how things happen. And so if a boulder falls off a cliff and crushes somebody, God didn't throw the boulder off the cliff. The boulder moved and gravity takes it down, and that's how the person gets crushed. But they weren't aware of that kind of thing. So they come up with a philosophy that, well, if you're good, everything works well for you. If you're bad, things don't work well for you. Well, that doesn't work. You read the Psalms, and the psalmist is always lamenting the idea that the wicked are getting by with all kinds of things, and that's just totally unfair. And of course, we look at someone like Job, who is this good man, described as this great man, and he has all kinds of trouble. And so that doesn't particularly work. And it seems that there is a progression within the Hebrew scriptures themselves, and also moving into Christian writings, where there's an understanding that what happens in the world is not as tied to divine reward and divine punishment as may have once been thought. So Jesus talked about two accidents, two terrible things that happened in his time in Luke chapter 13. And he said, when that tower fell and crushed all those people at Siloam, do you think that it crushed them because they were worse than anybody else? Or he said, when Pilate's soldiers actually came where the Jews were offering sacrifices, and they actually just took the Jews who were offering the sacrifices, put them on the altar, and offered them as human sacrifices, do you think they were worse with anybody than anybody else? Jesus also was walking with his disciples one day, and there was a blind beggar, begging there. And the disciples said to him, was this man born blind because of his sin or because of his parents' sin? And now he was born blind. So, we're talking in utero sin, if that's what, if it was because of his own sin. And Jesus said, well, it wasn't either one. And so there seems to be a kind of a move, even within Scripture, toward a greater understanding of a certain randomness that exists there. And but throughout the world, there has been an idea that if you're having difficulty, it's because you're bad, and this is some sort of karma. This is some sort of cosmic punishment. This is some sort of divine retribution of some kind. And so there are things that are said, often inadvertently, but that can be extremely hurtful. There was back in Bible times, there was an old Persian proverb that said, if you see a blind man, kick him. Why should you be kinder than God? So the idea was that if a person was blind, that obviously indicated something about a relationship with the power, the force, the supernatural. So if you see a blind man, kick him. And so there are some significant challenges that I think that Christians need to, and I say Christians because I have experienced it in that context, that Christians need to be thinking about. And these may not be the kind of things that you have to deal with directly so much in your congregation, but you do have to deal with them in society, because there are these pervasive ideas that are out there that somehow God's got this all under control. It's all taken care of. And if it happens, it was God's will that it happened. And there's an inability, it seems, for us to understand that the universe has a randomness to it. The meteorites just kind of come. It doesn't floods and plagues and famines and all those kind of things just come. One of my favorite texts of Scripture, in fact, one of my favorite books of the Jewish and Christian Scriptures, is the book of Ecclesiastes. And it's because it's a pessimistic book that doesn't buy glib cliches as answers. And so Solomon, who is alleged to be the writer of it, makes a comment that I think is very worthwhile, and one that needs to be considered by people who are given to glibness and handing all this kind of thing off as God's involvement. It says, the race is not to the swift, or the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise, or wealth to the brilliant, or favor to the learned. Solomon is saying, there are people who are really smart, but they're not necessarily the ones who get ahead in life because other problems come along and bother them. The fastest runners may trip and fall, and they're not the ones who win the race necessarily. And so he goes on, and wealth doesn't necessarily come to the brilliant, favor to the learned. There are things that happen. And so he goes on and he says, but time and chance happen to them all. But time and chance happen to them all. In other words, these things that are going on, the poor woman that I was dealing with, it wasn't that she was bad, or that she needed to be taught lessons, or that whatever it might be. time and chance happen to us all. And as I said, this is not something that you are necessarily dealing with so much, but I thought it might be kind of interesting to sort of see the journey of one person who moved from a very traditional basis to something that's a lot more open. And it also might give you just a few talking points when you're interacting with others in society who are given to those kind of cliches and those kind of glib responses. It might give you some type of talking point so that you can engage them in a way that that makes them think, doesn't necessarily drag them totally out of their comfort zone, but within their comfort zone creates a little discomfort. And so that's the gist of what I was wanting to say today. And I'm very glad that that early in my experience, I encountered some things that really caused me to question the glib answers that I had been given. Thank you very much. I appreciate being with you. Always a pleasure. And I look forward to that day. And we hope it'll be within weeks or months, at least, pretty quickly, at least, when we can be back together again. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much, Jim. I appreciate those words. I think a lot of us are probably dealing with a lot of those cliches, and it's good to have some wise words to take with us. Especially sometimes I just find on Facebook it's just better to say nothing these days. So thank you very much for being with us today. Appreciate it, and we're getting some accolades in the comment box. So thank you very much. So we will extinguish our chalices. And we will say these words together. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. My closing words today are from Donna Ashworth. I got this off of, I think it was off of Facebook or off the famous internet. It's kind of a nice saying to end our service today. History will remember when the world stopped and the flights stayed on the ground and the cars parked in the street and the trains didn't run. History will remember when the schools closed and the children stayed indoors and the medical staff walked towards the fire and they didn't run. History will remember when the people sang on their balconies in isolation, but so very much together in courage and song. History will remember when the people fought for their old and the weak, protected the vulnerable by doing nothing at all. History will remember when the virus left and the houses opened and the people came out and hugged and kissed and started again, kinder than before. So since we didn't have our normal interlude and offering, we have it now. This is an opportunity to hear some music by Lou Murray, who used to be our accompanist. We miss her very much. I think I saw her maybe on here at some point. Please take an opportunity to do your online contributions. You can go to the URL that's on the screen and you can make a contribution to the church. 40% of anything that's on the donation box will go to the Zebra Coalition. As we mentioned, the SAC has continued to support the Zebra Coalition. Many local nonprofits are suffering right now because they can't do their normal fundraisers. And then to donate to the church or to make your pledge, you can go on to our website. So we'll have that lovely music, and take an opportunity to listen to that and wave to each other, and until we are together next week. We will see you all next week. Join us then.